Hey guys, this is Collin Moshman for CardRunners.com. Today's Quickie is going to be a range quiz where we look at the calling ranges against Regs in different 9-man and MTT S&G spots. Besides just pulling up the ranges and moving on, I want to talk about how to generate these ranges or think about what we might call with in-game in case it's a range that you haven't recently looked up or are explicitly familiar with. So in this first spot, as an example, it's a 9-man Senego. The small blind open shows 5 blinds, and I've set his shoving range to 2%, which is, of course, a crazy range, but that way we don't have S&G Wizard immediately displaying a range so that there's no thought left on our part. So in a spot like this, there are two things we're going to be thinking about. One is exactly how wide is he shoving? Answer, very wide. And the other is what odds are we getting? So if we're in game, it'll be displayed as a pot of 900, 600 to call, and so we can pretty clearly see that we're getting 3-2 odds, and therefore want 40% equity against the shoving range. So immediately we see we're going to call very wide, since we only need 40% against a very wide shoving range. So based on that, we might estimate that we want roughly a top 50% hand. That should be a pretty safe calling range, because then even if he isn't shoving the top 100% of hands, just shipping anything, then we still are looking pretty good against the shoving range, and it's furthermore only 40% equity required. So definitely our king deuce off is going to be a call, as well as any ace, pair, pretty much any suited face card, and mid-high queens, decent jack X hands. And we can verify that range in the Hold'em Resources Nash calculator, and the small blind shoves top 70%, which against a reg looks quite realistic. In fact, some regs will shove any 2 cards, and if you do see a reg show down a hand like 3 deuce off after shoving against you in the small blind for 5 blinds, definitely take a note of that, and you can call them exploitively wide. And even against top 70, we can call that full 50% and even a little bit wider, down to hands like queen 3 off, jack deuce suited, and 8-7 suited. In our next spot, we have a 180-man situation, where with blinds of 1,000, 2,000, and the 200 ante, UTG, a reg, shows a 7-blind stack. Everyone folds to us in the big blind, and we cover. Now this spot is similar to the last one in that we're getting comparable odds. So the pot is going to be the starting pot of 4,600 plus this 14,000, so 18,600, costs us 12,000 to call, and so we're getting a little bit better than 3-2. So equity-wise, we're going to have a similar requirement. Here, however, we're definitely going to put him on a tighter range than the last player, given that he's shoving UTG. And a decent rule of thumb, when you need 40% equity or so against a range that isn't super wide, but isn't tight either, is that you can call with at least suited Broadway hands, all pairs, suited aces, mid-high offsuit aces, and at least that kind of a range. So let's go ahead and pull this one up in Nash, and we see that UTG shoves around top 21%. So this is a chip analysis. It's not yet the final table, and there are definitely players who are going to be shoving a bit wider than this because they're about to get blinded out. For example, I would definitely be shoving wider on the ace-x front, including down to hands like ace-6 offsuit, and at some tables, any ace-x hand. But we'll start with this range, and our calling range in the big blind is going to include pairs, suited aces, most offsuit aces, suited Broadways, and the better offsuit Broadways. In fact, down to a hand like 9-8 suited. Now, a hand like 9-8 suited may seem tough to call off because pretty much we're hoping for a flip against the low pair, but even against many of the hands that have a speed, it's going to be easy for us to have 40% equity. As an example of that, suppose he has a hand like ace-7 off. In that case, even though we're behind, we still have pretty good equity with our 9-8 suited. So we put him ace-7 off, we give ourselves 9-8 suited. By symmetry, the actual suits don't matter, and we have a full 46% equity. So this would be a very profitable call if we somehow knew that he had ace-7 offsuit. And let's say that he has king-jack. Well, in that case, we'll put in some suits for him. We have our 9-8 suited, and even here, it's very close to break even, so 9-8 suited would be a reasonable call against that shoving range.